In today's Locked On Pelicans, I'm going to tell you why, no, the Pelicans are not trading Herb Jones, but we'll tell you who they might trade. It's the Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Wednesday. And no, the Pelicans are not trading Herb Jones, and I will tell you why, along with who is untradeable in my opinion for this team, and then the guys that could be moved. So we are going to look at a trade full show in today's episode. We're going to look at not trading Herb Jones, why probably CJ is going to be the one coming out piggybacking off of what we talked about yesterday, but that has a knock-on impact of Brandon Ingram re-signing with the team. And then Sunday is a really important date, and I'll tell you why. That's coming up in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, breaking down this team, the league, everything you want to know in an easy to understand fashion, hopefully here. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast for a reason. So let's get into this. This comes from Shams Charania, and then people kind of aggregated this and ran with this in a very stupid way, in my opinion. Basically, he wrote an article for ESPN because he's over there now, which is weird to say. And he said teams are calling the Pelicans about players. You know, they're interested in Herb Jones. They're calling about Herb Jones. They're also calling about CJ McCollum. We'll get into him next here. But let's make this very clear. Just because teams are calling about Herb Jones does not mean that the Pelicans have any intention of trading him. What I understand is he's basically as untouchable as it gets. They are not going to trade away Herb Jones whatsoever. And if for whatever reason they did, it would be for such a massive haul that you'd be like, oh, okay, you can't say no to that sort of thing. Giannis and a bunch of first-round picks, yeah, you trade Herb Jones for that. But it would be something so stupid like that. That's the only reason that they would part with him. Look, there's a number of reasons why. The first is, yeah, he's good. He's just really good, right? Like, there's no other way to put it. He made the all-defensive first team last year. He goes out and defends at a high level every single night. For the most part in his career, he's been pretty healthy. 78 games his rookie year, 66 the next, 76 last year. And while this year there were some injuries, overall he's been good. He finished 5th in Defensive Player of the Year last year. Basically the first non-center, the first non-big man to make that list. He's also improved his three-point shooting basically as his career's gone on. Took a real big step forward last season at 42%. On 4 attempts. It's dipped this year. He's coming back from injury. That makes sense. But when you look at his scoring per 36 minutes, it still remains pretty good because he's trying to make up for it in other areas by cutting more and doing things like that. He's just that glue guy on offense that you really need, the one who will do all the dirty work. And the dirty work is what he specializes in. How many times have we basically seen Herb Jones comes back for this team and their level of intensity, their level of fight, all of that is massively raised? That's what Herb Jones does. He is flat out, and we talked about this last week on Locked On Pelicans. I did a show saying he is the most important player for this team. I think it's really as simple as that. I don't think that's really up for debate. You could call him the heart, soul, whatever. He is the leader, in my opinion, other than maybe DeJounte Murray and CJ for this team. He's about as core of a piece as it gets. A guy they drafted in the second round that they believed in and rewarded him with a big-time contract extension, new contract this past summer. He signed for, his contract extension kicked in last year. It was like 4 for $48, whatever that number ended up being. It's a steal of a contract. He is so good and on a contract that's incredible. $13 million this year, $14 million next year, $15 million the year after that. That's fantastic for what he brings to the team. And also, the players absolutely love him. They love Herb Jones. When you look at, whenever he scores, whenever he does something, they are all over him. They just freaking love this guy. He's a good locker room presence in that regard with everything. There's not a whole lot to complain about when it comes to Herb Jones. Great contract, high-level defender, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, is a likable dude, never going to be a locker room problem or anything like that, just wants to go fish and play basketball. We love him here. Look, the other reason that he's untradeable is they know he's a fan favorite. The franchise, whether it's the front office, the coaching staff, to social media and everybody, they know everyone loves them some Herb Jones. Trading him away would be an insult to this fan base, in my opinion, even if it's for a massive amount. Even if you got an incredible return, they're not trading him. They're just not going to trade him at all. He, in my opinion, is about untouchable as they get. I just bought a Herb Jones City Edition jersey. I might throw it on after this and just kind of wear it around the house. I'm in a Herb Jones kind of mood here. When you look at some of the other guys on this team, I don't think he's the only untradeable, untouchable guy. And I don't want to say like Brandon Ingram's untradeable because they can't move him. If you were to look at guys on this team that they are just straight up not going to trade, Herb Jones is at the top of the list. I think Trey Murphy after that is next. And then truthfully, I think after that, it would be Zion Williamson as the guy that they wouldn't trade just because I think they're willing to go down with the Zion Williamson ship. And if you trade him, you're going through a rebuild and it feels like everyone's going to lose their job. So from that, he's probably a little bit untradeable. Along with Yves Missi. You drafted a center in a first round that turned out to be a gem and is going to be an impactful starter for you for the next 6 years at least. It feels like. Everyone other than that, I'm going to sneeze. Everyone other than that is, in my opinion, very tradable, including Jose Alvarado, who signed his new deal. I think Hawkins is tradable. I think CJ, we'll talk about that more, is very tradable. I think DeJounte Murray, if a team really wanted to overpay the Pelicans for him, they'd be like, okay, yeah, we can do that. Even though I think he's, well, not untradeable, is like in the guy that you're not really going to move, partially because of what they traded to get him. And that's really about it, right? Everyone else, I think, can be moved at this point in time, and they would be happy to potentially move for the right deal. But Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Yves Missi, then Zion, that's probably the order I'd put him in. That's probably like the 4 untouchables right now on this roster, but Zion could easily be taken off of that if, you're able to find the right deal. Would you trade Herb Jones? Would you trade Herb Jones straight up for Giannis? For Giannis and first round picks? What's like the lowest amount that you would give up Herb Jones for? Let me know in the comments down below. So coming up next, in that report from Shams, there was an interesting note that teams are inquiring about CJ McCollum. Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to take on all of the NFL and NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and NBA all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the NBA. Get in on those live in-game betting options. You know how the game is going. You can check the stats, be like, oh, the line's updated. I want in on that one, and place a bet immediately. And you can do that over at FanDuel.com. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. And with Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with your existing contacts and ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA to cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, coming to you like nobody else does, breaking down the topics you want to hear. And if you want to read about it too, we've got the Locked On Pelicans newsletter, introducing the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. All right, let's look at the trade market still, because what is interesting is some of the stuff that Shams Charania has said, and that was beyond just teams are calling, right? Like, teams are calling, and the Pelicans are like, hey, what's up, Cavaliers? Oh, you're interested in Herb Jones? Sorry, we're not trading him, and the phone's hung up, right? Like, that's how this is going. That's what it means by teams are calling. But if a team calls about CJ McCollum, they're going to be like, okay, what's your offer? Like, what are you looking to try and do here? And let's see if we can come to an agreement, because they are very open to trading CJ McCollum. You know, Shams in this was saying that Brandon Ingram, even at his current deal, is untenable for New Orleans. We looked at it yesterday, right? At the end of the season, if they keep everyone, make a small move to duck the luxury tax, this team is $30.8 million away from the luxury tax next year. You re-sign Brandon Ingram at his $36 million per year deal right now. Well, you're over the luxury tax, and then you still need to fill out a bunch of roster spots, and it's before your first round pick, which is going to cost you $5 to $8 million. They're not going to do that, right? Then you're deep into not just deep into the luxury tax, but pushing the first apron, which is not really something they're going to be able to do because it just restricts things so much. So I do think CJ McCollum's the guy that's going to be the odd man out. And I think there's a couple of teams that do make some sense for a trade to potentially happen. One of them being the Orlando Magic is a team to really keep an eye on when it comes to that. But it makes much more sense to trade CJ McCollum. Far more sense to trade CJ McCollum, I think, here, and figure it out from there. You can trade him if you don't view him as a long-term piece. And then what you do is you re-sign Brandon Ingram. And what this is going to lead to is like a 1-and-1 deal, kind of that prove it year, a 2-year deal with the second option being a player option, which Ingram would in theory decline. And then cool, he's on a 1-year deal. He plays really well. And then he goes and gets big money elsewhere. So I think that's really the way that this will go. You can only really do that, it sounds like. The only way New Orleans keeps Brandon Ingram is if CJ McCollum gets moved. And if CJ McCollum gets moved, I think New Orleans is really going to look at trying to re-sign Brandon Ingram. I think there's a couple of logical teams for him to go to, Orlando being the biggest one here. But I could also see a team like Miami trying to make a move like that, especially if it's send out Jimmy Butler, get CJ McCollum in return, because they're worried about Butler walking in free agency to some degree, and it sounds like they're open to trading him too. What that trade looks like, I don't really know just yet, but I can see that being the framework or parts of some of the deal here. So if CJ gets traded, I think it really opens the door to bring Brandon Ingram back to this team on a short-term deal that lets him earn more money further down the line. That to me makes the most sense. Trade CJ, basically $30-something million this year, bring back a $10 million guy and a $20 million guy. One of those expires, so it sheds some salary, gives you room to re-sign Brandon Ingram, and then you can trade that other player for something else later. It fixes two problems for New Orleans. If you're an everydayer of the show, and I hope you are, you heard me go into more depth about this yesterday. We really talked about this in yesterday's show. Then lo and behold, the report comes out today about CJ McCollum. Anyway, the way to look at it is this. You know, they have two problems: trying to re-sign Brandon Ingram or figuring out what to do with that, and then not having really tradable pieces. You need that mid-tier salary, as we talked about in yesterday's show. Sometimes it's just as simple as reducing guys down to their contract, and that dehumanizes them. It's kind of weird, and that feels like it's the math side, the spreadsheet side of things, right, of the NBA game, which no one really likes, but that's sometimes how it goes, and that's what's happening kind of in this situation. It's tough to move dudes who make $30+ million. Simple as that. It's not hard to trade guys who make $15 to $20 to $25 million. It's a whole lot easier just with the way the collective bargaining agreement, the CBA, works. So they are much more likely to trade CJ McCollum than Brandon Ingram, in my opinion. Shams did say something interesting, though. That kind of caught me off guard with what he said. He said, I expect there to be a robust market for Brandon Ingram between now and the trade deadline. You sure? Look, he's also putting some stuff out about Brandon Ingram turning down extensions, previously a $15 million extension. That would have been a 3-year extension, a $40 million extension last year, which makes sense. I think New Orleans would be fine signing Brandon Ingram for $40 million, and he's turned down all of those. But it's very obvious who's leaking this, right? This feels like it's coming from the Pelicans here. And so they're going to probably leak like, yeah, we're getting tons of interest in Brandon Ingram. And then it's put out like, hey, there's a ton of interest in Brandon Ingram. And we'll go more into why no one's acting on it just yet in the next segment. But look, if there was a robust market for Brandon Ingram, he would have been dealt by now. It would have been dealt in the offseason. Shams talked about how there was some interest in a Karl Anthony Towns for Brandon Ingram swap that would have put New Orleans in a bad financial position. But maybe he could have made it work. I don't really see how that would have made it work, how they could have figured that out, but they talked about it. But when you look at this, it just... I don't feel there's a big market for Brandon Ingram. I don't think he has a ton of leverage to ask for a bunch more money from the New Orleans Pelicans. So when you look at this situation, yeah, they could get him back on, a 1-year, $40 million with a player option for, $43, $44 million after that. And it's like, Brandon, go out and play really well. The issue with that, there is a big issue with that, right? Like one of the reasons why he turned down that 3-year, $50 million max extension was he could maybe earn all NBA and get the Supermax deal and earn even more money. Now, he's not really an all NBA guy, right? His play style doesn't really kind of fit with making one of those teams. And so it's a little bit of foolishness, but if he's going to try and kind of go into next season on like a prove it deal, like how is that going to impact it where he's like truly playing for money, playing for his future, contract? Does that mean if ever, and if say everyone's healthy next year, that like, how does that impact the style they want to play and all of that? And again, what happens if he gets hurt? That's where this is a kind of a big concern, given how injury prone he and Zion are, right? Like we can say it at this point. Can you really have both of them? One guy, maybe. Two, who knows? And so even if New Orleans gets great value on Brandon Ingram, should they actually do that sort of move? We looked at yesterday what happens if he just walks for nothing and it doesn't give them really any flexibility to do anything. So maybe it's better to sign him and then try and trade him and avoid that kind of awful situation where, okay, you have your same roster now without Brandon Ingram and that's that. Maybe that's still the move. At least you're below the luxury tax, but it's not like you can spend the $30+ million. That's not how it works. So go give that show a listen if you haven't already. Let me know what you think. What should they do? Is it trade CJ, sign BI long-term, or do we even have a short-term deal? Or you're just like, screw it, I want to let him walk. I'm so over all of this. And yeah, I get why you would be feeling that if that was the case. So coming up next, the trade season starts on Sunday. Kind of. I'll tell you what I mean. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. This is my go-to ticketing app because of all of the features that they have. Game Time Picks now has a new feature called, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. And Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have the all-in pricing. I toggle this every time. You click that button up front, it's going to show you the total amount. No surprise fees at checkout. If you're going to a venue you've never been to before, you get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. They also have flash deals. If you're bored on a Friday, you don't know what to do, open up the Game Time app, see what's going on, and you're going to find great prices on live events, not just sports, but concerts, theater, comedy, and more. All of a sudden now you've got a great date night planned. You didn't even spend all that much money. We're going to make it even cheaper for you. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Don't forget the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter over at LockedOnDaily.com. And of course, Locked On Saints should be your second listen. Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold. He is the best. They are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Literally no better Saints coverage for sure. I love what he does. Free every single day. So one thing I want to make you aware of is, do y'all know what Sunday is? Do y'all know what Sunday is? It's December 15th. What's that mean? What that means is trade season is officially underway. Kind of. I'm putting an asterisk on this and I'll tell you why. Basically, starting on Sunday the 15th, everyone in the NBA can be traded. There are rules that when you sign a new contract, you can't be traded for 3 months, things, 6 months, 3 months, whatever it might be, things like that. There's just limits on when that happens. Now, all of a sudden, though, we're looking at this and it's like, okay, everyone can be traded. Basically, the restrictions go off on December 15th. So that's exciting. That's when trades can actually kind of materialize and things can actually happen. The number is this. It's 87% of the NBA can be traded on Sunday, after Sunday. I forget if it's like actually that day or like right after. It's pretty wild to think about. 87% of the NBA is trade eligible through the trade deadline. There's only 2 players this season who have a no trade clause, and that's Bradley Beal and LeBron James. There's a couple of other players that if you sign an extension after a certain cutoff time, you can't do it. We're not going to go into those guys because they're not really eligible to be traded. Then there's guys that sign like a 1-year deal with their existing team, and that kind of limits if they can be moved too as well. But for the most part, 87% of the NBA can be traded come December 15th. That doesn't mean, though, that the floodgates open and trades are going to start happening. If you look at this historically, trades in December and January are really rare, at least through mid-January. From December 15th, say, to January 15th, the first month of this period, the trade deadline is February 6th. Nothing gets done. In the past, I think it's 8 years, 6 or 7 trades have gone down in December to mid-January. That's it. Think about that for a second. That's how rare a deal getting done before the trade deadline is that we've seen like less than 1 per year, basically 1 per year, I think is what it comes down to. Let me see if I can find the exact number here when it comes to it. So just because everyone's eligible to be traded does not mean that like it's going to happen right away here. From December 15th to January 15th over the past 6 seasons, there have been 7 trades. So a little bit more than 1 per year. So don't expect the Pelicans to immediately trade CJ McCollum come Sunday or anything like that. While they maybe want to make that move, there's no reason for them not to. It'd be a good thing to do it sooner rather than later for a bunch of reasons the everydayers know, because I've mentioned it here, but I'll say it again. Out-tank other tanking teams. Do that now. It still takes another partner to do it. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean that other teams are going to. And so they might wait. And it usually takes a deadline to really spur some action here. And that's probably what it's going to take. Still the trade deadline. So just because all these guys can be traded doesn't mean that they're going to be. But I would expect the Pelicans to look into a cost-saving move. There's no reason not to. Obviously, you're not going to pay the luxury tax for a team that is not making the postseason. Right? Like, there's no reason to do that. But also, if they're really trying to think long-term about how best to navigate the Brandon Ingram situation, it's not letting him walk and signing with another team. Not that there is. It's not even trading him to another team, because they just need to give you like a middling asset back to kind of pull something like that off. You really want to take full advantage of this and kind of limit the damage to the franchise as best you can. And that's probably re-signing Brandon Ingram and trying to kind of do this dance all again next year or the year after that, depending on what that extension, what that new contract would look like. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy and you might end up in the same situation, but it's in a sense kicking that can down the road a little bit to at least try and find something. Ripping the Band-Aid off doesn't actually improve the team here. So, and Ingram's value is probably about as low as it's ever going to be too. So that's a real, something to keep in mind as well when it comes to all of this. So trade CJ, re-sign Ingram, and maybe we just kind of run it back with that group again next year. And whatever the top draft pick that they're going to get is, that's going to be interesting too, because it feels like there's a bunch of players who are going to be difference makers at the NBA level. This draft and next draft too. This is a good time to kind of be in this market for everything. But trade season unofficially starts on Sunday, but don't expect a bunch of stuff to go down right away. It's going to take some time. If something does happen, it means, I don't know, we'll break it down here. I'll tell you what that means when that does or does not happen. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast. Don't forget about the free daily newsletter down at LockedOnDaily.com. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today. And as always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we'll be back with y'all tomorrow. Game day for the Pelicans. Getting a couple days of rest in here. They probably really needed that. See y'all next time.